Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Friday, 8th August 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. Israel's Security Cabinet, under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, authorized a ground offensive on Friday, August 8, 2025, aimed at seizing full control of Gaza City. This decision has sparked widespread international condemnation, with concerns mounting over the potential displacement of 1 million Palestinians and the escalation of civilian casualties. Volker Turk, the UN human rights chief, implored Israel to abandon its plans, emphasizing the need for humanitarian aid and the unconditional release of hostages held by Palestinian armed groups. Echoing these concerns, Secretary General Antonio Guterres' office also voiced criticism of Israel's decision. The UK's ambassador to Israel, Simon Walters, warned that extending the war and occupying Gaza would be a huge mistake, advocating for a political and diplomatic resolution. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer urged Netanyahu to reconsider the Gaza City takeover, cautioning against further bloodshed and questioning its efficacy in securing the release of Israeli hostages. Critics contend that the plan risks perpetual conflict, imposing a substantial financial strain on Israel and replicating previous unsuccessful strategies. In Tel Aviv, members of an Israeli activist group protested near a U.S. embassy building, etching an anti-war message in the sand directed at then-President Trump, urging him to end Bibi's war. Turning to Latvia, disturbances erupted in Riga as Beitar Jerusalem fans, frustrated by their team's loss to Riga FC, engaged in disruptive behavior, including throwing pyrotechnics and igniting flares. Japan is enhancing its South Pacific alliances, marked by the initial docking of Japanese warships in New Zealand's capital in almost 9 decades. Heavy rainfall is triggering intense floods and mudslides on Kyushu Island, resulting in top-tier warnings and mass evacuations. Astronaut Takuya Onishi has returned following a 5-month stint on the International Space Station with an international team. Japan's household spending increased by 1.3% in June, averaging at $895,419 for households of 2 or more. The government is allowing ministries to request 20% more funds for priority policies in the fiscal 25 budget. The U.S. will revise an executive order to remove duplicate tariffs on Japanese goods after trade discussions in Washington. Japan is grappling with foreign workers departing without settling tax debts. Insects are the popular pet of choice in Japan for many. Despite ambitious EU plans, efficient high-speed rail remains rare in Europe. However, a direct high-speed rail link now connects Paris and Berlin, operated jointly by Deutsche Bahn and France's NCF. An ICE train departs Paris's Gare de l'Est daily at 9:55 a.m. The train travels via Strasbourg, Karlsruhe, and Frankfurt to Berlin Hauptbahnhof in just over 8 hours. This marks the first direct high-speed city center rail connection between the capitals of the EU's 2 largest countries. The expansion of the high-speed rail network is part of the EU's vision for Europe, but faces challenges such as complex timetables, difficult ticketing processes, and high prices. In England, Manchester United unveiled its new world-class training complex. The £50 million investment aims to restore the club to the top of European soccer. Ukraine mourned the loss of war correspondent Victoria Rushchina, who died in Russian captivity after reporting from occupied territories. Experts suspect she was tortured. Russia may soon be the subject of negotiation, as former U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans to meet with President Vladimir Putin on August 15th in Alaska to discuss ending the war in Ukraine, proposing a resolution that includes some swapping of territories. The United States is also seeing internal discussions, with the White House reportedly planning a potential summit between Trump and Putin, coinciding with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk's suggestion that a freeze in the war is near. Switching to the United Kingdom, Foreign Secretary David Lammy is hosting U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his family at Chevening House, highlighting a personal relationship that developed prior to their current roles. Malaysia is taking a leading role in ASEAN's efforts to address the conflict in Myanmar by leading the delegation to the country. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim announced that Chinese President Xi Jinping is planning to attend the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur in October. Domestically, Grab, the ride-hailing service, faced criticism for a Mandarin driver trial that charged higher fares to Mandarin speakers, which was halted after discrimination accusations. The death of 13-year-old Sarah Karina Mahathir in Sabah's Papar district led to protests, resulting in the Attorney General ordering her exhumation. Indigenous communities in Sarawak are using community mapping to assert their land rights in the rainforest. A murder investigation is underway after Corporal Maud Hafizul Ijam Aslan, a police officer, died when a getaway vehicle rammed him during a robbery. The United States, under President Donald Trump, has set a Friday deadline for Russia's Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire with Ukraine, threatening secondary sanctions if the deadline is missed. Although Trump initially suggested an August 8 deadline, he subsequently became non-committal. Trump clarified that a meeting between Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is not a prerequisite for a meeting between himself and Putin. The United States and Russia are tentatively scheduled to meet in Alaska on August 15 to discuss ending the conflict in Ukraine, marking the first encounter between the two leaders since Trump's return to office. Simultaneously, oil markets are bracing for potentially lower prices as President Trump's threat of tariffs on nations purchasing Russian oil, such as India and China, is counterbalanced by increased production from global oil producers. India faces challenges in its relationship with the United States, complicated by trade disputes and differing approaches to Russia. Despite Prime Minister Narendra Modi's efforts to strengthen ties with key global players, these challenges highlight the constraints on India's international influence. Initial reports suggested a potential suspension of Indian arms purchases from the U.S. due to tariffs implemented under the previous U.S. administration, but the Ministry of Defense has refuted these claims. Peter Navarro, the White House trade advisor, defended the tariffs on India as a matter of national security, differentiating them from retaliatory measures. Within India, the state of Uttarakhand has suffered significant damage from intense rainfall, triggering landslides and widespread flooding. Meanwhile, across the sea, Irish Foreign Minister Simon Harris intends to engage with the Indian community in Ireland, acknowledging their valuable contributions to Irish society. Hong Kong recently endured torrential rainfall, prompting authorities to issue multiple black rainstorm warnings to alert residents to the hazardous conditions. Australia experienced significant weather disruptions as heavy rainfall led to the cancellation of the Byron Writers Festival. Sydney's City Surf race also faced warnings due to the deluge. Rainfall totals in some areas nearly doubled the August average. In international news, Australian Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong condemned Israel's plans regarding Gaza, citing concerns about international law and the safety of hostages and civilians. Australia joined a G7 statement denouncing Hong Kong's efforts to silence exiled dissidents, specifically arrest warrants and bounties. Domestically, Nine Entertainment is reportedly seeking acquisitions after selling its online real estate platform domain to Costa, expecting proceeds of $150 billion. The government also faced criticism for denying visas to 8 batch researchers, mainly from Asia and Africa, impacting a research conference in Cairns. China saw the release of Bao Fan, founder of China Renaissance Holdings, after more than 2 years of detention, a situation that initially impacted his company's stock value. President Xi Jinping told Vladimir Putin that China supports better U.S.-Russia ties, despite China's stance on the conflict in Ukraine. Within China, flash floods in Gansu Province's Yuzhong County led to at least 10 fatalities and 33 missing persons, prompting Jinping to demand intensive rescue efforts. Regarding foreign affairs, China warned the Philippines to stay out of the Taiwan situation, stressing the One China principle to avoid escalation. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun stated that leaders from over 20 nations, including all CEO members and heads of 10 international organizations, will be participating in events in China. Armenia, with U.S. mediation, has signed peace agreements with Azerbaijan to end decades of conflict. The accord focuses on reopening transportation routes shut since the early 1990s. Azerbaijan also agreed to the terms of the peace. The agreement, brokered at the White House under then-President Donald Trump, addresses the Nagorno-Karabakh dispute. As part of the deal, Armenia granted the U.S. exclusive development rights to a transit corridor. This corridor is now named the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. The agreement marks a strategic move by the U.S. to increase its influence in the region. This occurs as Russia's regional presence diminishes. Indonesia has seen artists and students creatively protesting through the adoption of a pirate skull symbol from the One Piece manga, as noise pollution from mega speakers during celebrations increasingly draws criticism, including from religious leaders. In a separate incident, an Indonesian father is seeking the death penalty after his soldier son's hazing death, resulting in the arrest of 4 soldiers. Germany has halted arms exports to Israel destined for use in Gaza, citing growing worries over the escalating conflict, its impact on civilians, and the unresolved hostage situation. Chancellor Friedrich Merz expressed increasing uncertainty about how Israel's military strategy would effectively disarm Hamas and secure the release of the hostages. He affirmed that Germany would not authorize military equipment exports potentially used in Gaza until further notice, a move prompted by Israel's expanded operations in the Palestinian enclave. Spain is seeing potential political shifts as Miriam González Dorantes considers leading a new liberal party. This move aims to capitalize on the political vacuum left by Ciudadanos' decline. Firefighters in Cordoba successfully contained a fire at the Mesquita Cathedral, averting significant damage to the historic site. Meanwhile, the Spanish Ombudsman has launched an investigation into Jumila's ban on religious events in public sporting venues. Officials claim the ban protects traditional values, but critics see it as targeting Muslim gatherings. Brazil's diplomatic channels were activated as the Foreign Ministry summoned the U.S. Chargé d'Affaires, a response to the U.S. Embassy's pointed critique of Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes, who is overseeing cases involving ex-President Jair Bolsonaro, now facing trial for an alleged coup plot. Shifting gears, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva enacted a new environmental bill, sparking debate by vetoing key sections that aim to overhaul the country's environmental licensing framework. Meanwhile, in Rio de Janeiro, law enforcement launched operations targeting a criminal syndicate suspected of running an illicit ride-hailing service. Mexico's President Sheinbaum has stated that there is no evidence or ongoing investigation connecting Venezuela's President Maduro to the Sinaloa cartel. Adding to potential international friction, the president has also declared that U.S. forces are not welcome within Mexico's borders, especially following former President Trump's directive to the Pentagon to target drug cartels. She emphasized that any deployment of U.S. troops to Mexico by the Pentagon could severely damage bilateral relations, potentially leading to the worst diplomatic situation in decades. Canada is boosting its military budget to reach NATO's 2% GDP defense spending benchmark. Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled a substantial multi-billion-dollar military investment plan to accomplish this objective, reflecting concerns about safety related to President Trump's immigration regulations. Girl Guides of Canada have halted all trips to the United States. In other news, Cap's Cafe, owned by Kapil Sharma, experienced gunfire for the second time in a month. A social media post purportedly by gangster Goldie Dillon asserted accountability for the incident. Singapore is commemorating its 60th anniversary as it prepares for future challenges. The nation maintains a discreet security presence in Taiwan. This presence provides Singapore with a strategic advantage in Southeast Asia. This is especially relevant in scenarios involving a simulated Chinese blockade. Further strengthening ties. With China, Singapore's Coordinating Minister for National Security, K. Shanmugam, met with China's ambassador to Singapore, Hao Zhoming. They discussed security cooperation and bilateral relations. Spain has recently seen its Madrid City Council prohibit the Cúpula Sin Mueve festival. Authorities justified the ban by raising concerns about potential public disorder and expected noise complaints originating from nearby residents. In response, festival organizers have strongly condemned the council's action, alleging that it constitutes ideological discrimination. Turning to the United States, a new study sheds light on the introduction of non-native tick species. Researchers have discovered that ticks from Europe, Latin America, and Eastern Africa have found their way into the country. The study pinpoints travelers as the primary means of transport for these ticks, offering valuable data on how ticks spread, especially as global temperatures continue to rise. Kenya is mourning the loss of 25 lives following a tragic bus accident in Kisumu, a region known for its dangerous roads. Meanwhile, Kenya's international relations are under scrutiny as President William Ruto's commendation of China's influence on a new world order raises concerns, especially given the recent infrastructure and trade deals. The United States has signaled its displeasure, potentially considering the revocation of Nairobi's major non-NATO ally status. Armenia and Azerbaijan have signed a U.S.-brokered peace agreement at the White House, marking a significant step toward resolving their decades-long conflict. Facilitated by the United States, the agreement aims to establish lasting peace and unlock economic opportunities for both nations. A key element involves reopening vital transportation routes, including the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, a major transit corridor. Despite this progress, some unresolved issues still need to be addressed. In the United States, a shooting occurred near the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. The incident resulted in the deaths of a police officer and a suspected gunman. The name of the deceased officer has not been released. Emory University initially reported an active shooter situation on its Atlanta campus near the CDC, advising those on campus to run, hide, fight. Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr expressed his condolences and support for the Emory University community in the wake of the tragedy. Thailand and Cambodia engaged in a military conflict in July due to ongoing disputes regarding a Hindu temple. The clashes along the border resulted in at least 43 deaths on both sides. After 5 days of fighting, a fragile ceasefire was established. Sui and Katrin Benhold provided an analysis of the broader context surrounding the conflict. Belarus has sentenced a journalist to 10 years in prison for treason and revealing state secrets. The closed trial took place amid a crackdown on dissent. Mass protests in Belarus in August 2020 were harshly suppressed. These events prompt reflection on the country's current state and alternative possibilities. Pakistan saw its security forces kill 33 militants in a recent overnight operation near the Afghan border. The Pakistani government has alleged that these militants received support from India. This accusation is part of a recurring pattern, as Pakistan has previously accused New Delhi of backing the Pakistani Taliban and separatist movements within Balochistan. France experienced a devastating wildfire in the Eau department, southern France, which firefighters have now contained. The blaze, the largest in decades, tragically resulted in 1 death and the destruction of 36 homes. Despite containment, authorities are vigilant, monitoring for any potential flare-ups. Zambia recently received a favorable ruling from a South African court, allowing the repatriation of former President Edgar Lungu's remains for burial. The Pretoria High Court mandated that Lungu's family release the body to enable the burial to take place in Zambia. Turning to South Africa, the nation faces a concerning rise in poaching activities. This is particularly alarming given that South Africa is home to the world's largest rhino population, making these animals especially vulnerable to the increased threat. Democratic Republic of Congo's government recently underwent a cabinet reshuffle. This move aims to include opposition members, broadening the government's support, especially in regions struggling with conflict. Meanwhile, in Goma, a youth basketball academy provides a safe and empowering space for young people, offering them opportunities amid war and rebel occupation. Southeast Asian students are becoming a hot commodity for universities worldwide, spurring aggressive recruitment strategies. European institutions are particularly focused on attracting these students, facing increased competition on the global stage. Okay, I'm ready. Please provide the news articles. I will do my best to create engaging, detailed, and accurate summaries following all the instructions. Fiji is seeing its former top prosecutor, Christopher Pride, now in self-imposed exile in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Facing corruption charges, he alleges, are politically motivated from the country's anti-corruption agency. Shifting focus to Colombia and Peru, a territorial dispute has emerged over Santa Rosa de Yavari, a small Amazon River island with approximately 3,000 residents, with both nations asserting sovereignty. The United States is grappling with the fallout from past deportation policies, as dozens of Bhutanese men, previously deported from the U.S., are now stranded in refugee camps in Nepal, a country unwilling to accept them. In other news from the U.S., the Trump administration imposed a 39% tariff on imports from Switzerland, citing the country's significant role in gold refining and its impact on trade data. Moreover, the Trump administration is planning to cut funding for U.S.-funded Radio Free Europe, which employs exiled Russian journalists in Latvia to combat Russian propaganda, creating uncertainty for the organization. Grenada is seeing bipartisan efforts to remove the oath of allegiance to the British Crown, aligning with growing demands for slavery reparations and the removal of King Charles as head of state. In Argentina, a live stream of an undersea project is garnering significant public interest, occurring alongside President Javier Milei's substantial budget reductions for scientific endeavors. Transitioning to Cambodia, hundreds of Buddhist monks have performed a religious ceremony to honor soldiers killed in recent border clashes with Thai forces, also praying for peace. Chad's prosecutor general has requested a 25-year prison sentence for Success Masra, the former prime minister and a prominent opposition leader. A team of Egyptian surgeons traveled to Zimbabwe to collaborate with local doctors in providing free open-heart surgery to 10 children. Finally, in Afghanistan, a UN official has emphasized that reintegrating Afghan refugees is essential for the country's peaceful future. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.